Hey everyone, welcome to this week's episode of Menu Combat, what will be the final official episode of season 2 of Menu Combat. And you can see I have here artist and content creator GK. Say hello to the people.
What up, y'all? How y'all doing?
Yes, GK has built, at least to be one of the most thoughtful conversations on Twitter around games in general. And he's been, I think, what's been about 8, 10 months of doing content creation in terms of video and so forth,
Yeah, about 8 months.
about 8 months. And so,
Yeah.
in general, I've always known you as a person when I think about specifically JRPGs, we can have really good discussion. But I think more specifically as time has gone on, I'm like, that is a person who has a love for Xenoblade that I am excited to have conversations with. There's a lot of folks in the space, but I think the way in which you present and engage with games can yield to a good conversation. I think for anyone who's listened to this podcast, I had a very big emotional response to Xenoblade 3, and my appreciation of the Xenoblade series is quite high. And I've been just dying to find someone to have a good conversation with to kind of unpack it all. And so, thank you so much for making time today.
Nah, thank you, man. Glad to be here. Always cool to talk with you, man.
Most def, most def. I want to start with this because I think it does a lot to frame the conversation, especially because I've heard a lot of Xenoblade 3 talk to this moment, but I think I'm curious for you, how did you enter Xenoblade 3 in terms of your background in the series?
hmm
Because I think one of the things as we unpack today, I wonder a lot for me is that is my engagement with the game affected by my framing? So I've played Xenoblade 1. That game is probably one of the most important games I've played in my life. I
Mm.
beat that
Okay.
on when I got it and played on my Wii U. I played probably 3 or 4 chapters of Xenoblade X on my Wii U. I never got to
Okay.
finish it. Then when I got my Switch, I did not get Xenoblade 2. And that's not for all the controversy we're getting. I just didn't get it at that time.
Oh, okay. Got you.
And then I got Xenoblade 3 upon release. And it took me, what is 2 years of playing it on and off over the 2 years. And
I love those. The ones that
yes,
like you beat like over a long period of time.
yes,
It's a different vibe. It's a different feeling.
it's a different feeling. And I caught myself feeling that that was the best way for me to engage with that game, primarily because I think some of the themes of the game was important for me to get now rather than then. But I think for me, as I think I've told you, I take breaks in my games. I don't feel guilty about it. I'm just like, I'll get to it when I have the disposition to appreciate what's going on. So that's my vantage point. And I get the impression a lot of discourse around this game comes from the role that Xenoblade 2 and how that affects people's expectations and desires. So that's kind of and so I've assumed a lot about how you got into Xenoblade 3, but I want to open up the table so folks can see where you're coming from.
Okay. Well, I got my history with Xenoblade as a series, right? Is I played Xenoblade 1, the original Xenoblade 1 on the Wii. And I like to tell this story just as kind of like an allegory. But when I first played Xenoblade 1, because do you know about Operation Rainfall?
Yes, yes.
That's how I heard about Xenoblade 1 was they were petitioning for it to be localized in America. I played it and I was like, I don't know. I don't know if I like this.
Mhm.
Uh, the graphics were kind of like the faces were kind of like low res, and I don't know. The combat was kind of the combat was pretty abstract. Like I was attacking, but I wasn't like literally like the enemy wasn't moving, and I'm kind of attacking air, and the enemy's getting hit, so it didn't feel like real combat to me. So after a while, I was like, I'm gonna drop this. And then I think 6 months passed, and I was like, man, I'm in the mood for like to play something like sci-fi fantasy
Right.
with sci-fi fantasy vibes. Um, and I still had Xenoblade 1, so I was like, okay, let me give this a try again because I keep hearing people talk about this. This is around, I want to say, was this 2011, 2012?
That
Probably around
feels,
there, something around there.
I think it
Yeah.
gets published through GameStop at 2012.
Okay. So So I was like, okay. And this is 6 months later. I tried again, and something clicked, I guess, about the openness of the
Right.
environments. Where I was like, because there was this bridge in that first area. I think what's that first area called in Xenoblade? I'm gonna blank on names a lot here, but
No, you're fine. That's Colony 9,
um
right? Open
no,
Colony
no,
9.
no, not Colony. I don't think it's is it Colony 9? It might be Colony 9. But yeah, like I was at that first area and there was like a bridge or something. And I jumped off the bridge and it was a long jump down.
Yes.
And then I didn't die. I jumped in, I just went into the water. And I was like, oh, I think I understand what this is about. I think I understand
Yes.
what they're going for with the gameplay here. Uh, so uh, so yeah, so I played that and then beat the game, became a fan of the series. Xenoblade X comes out and it has mechs and it takes the openness to another level. Becomes my favorite game of all time. Um, and I'm trying to keep this brief
Yeah.
because
No,
we'll
you're good.
go into detail more. And then Xenoblade 2 comes out and it's kind of a return to like a less open format than what Xenoblade X was. Um, More main story focused, like
Right.
just more inspired by the spirit of Xenoblade 1. Um, I love that story. Xenoblade 2 to this day still has my favorite cast of characters in the series.
Okay.
Right. So, but there were gameplay problems, especially coming off of Xenoblade X. I had some gameplay problems with the field skills for Xenoblade 2, for example. And especially coming from Xenoblade 1 and X and really appreciating that openness that I
Right.
got in those games. So Xenoblade 2 kind of being a step back in that regard with like the field skills locking you out of certain areas and um the aesthetic not even being as I don't know, it didn't feel as like awe-inspiring as what I got from Xenoblade X. So as much as I love the story and the characters of Xenoblade 2, the actual act of playing it left some things to be desired. But I did like the combat. I
Right.
love the combat in Xenoblade 2. Um, so then coming into Xenoblade 3, um, my hope was that they take the exploration, they just improve on the exploration aspect because that's kind of what clicked for me with Xenoblade. Is like
Right.
the exploring the worlds. That's the main reason I go to Xenoblade is the world building. So that was my vantage point going into Xenoblade 3. I don't know if that answer I hope that answered the question.
That does. I think it gives folks perspective from where both of like framing how we'll respond to different parts of the game. And I think
Yes, yeah.
that's a good that's a good start to kind of get to one of the things that the more and more I look back at my Xenoblade 3 experience, I'm like, this is better design than I think folks appreciate.
By the way,
Yes.
you were right. It's Colony 9.
All right, all right, all
Yeah,
right.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I was worried, but I was like, I know that I'm like you, I'm gonna blank on so many names
No,
today.
yeah, 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 yeah. It's cool though. It's a lot to remember.
You're not lying. There's a lot.
That's why I take notes.
Yes. So I want to start with that. I there's a moment the way I typically play Xenoblade is like I like to just go straight forward typically. I mean, whenever one of the things that's beautiful about the series is that the way that the paths are designed is like they feel so vast at times that you want to kind of peek around the corner, peek around things. And I think one of the things that I've always appreciated is that it often is the sight that intrigues you. It often is the visuals of like, oh, what is this view? What is this perspective? And I remember at the very early parts of Xenoblade 3, it felt like the way that these places were designed, it felt, and mind you, I was playing the game very straightforward. I'm like, I'm primarily focusing on story. I'm trying to go straight. And it so I think my first blush impression was like, okay, this is a game that feels a little bit narrower, feels a little bit more confined at times.
Mm-hmm.
But there is a moment, and I think it happens right around chapter 5, where they start sending you back to earlier locations. And I'm
Yeah, yeah,
starting to
yeah.
see, like, hold on, hold on. How did I miss all of this wrapped around the castle? Or how did I miss this? And it wasn't just that there are moments where, because you mentioned field skills in Xenoblade 2, there's a couple of field skills in this game. There's what, four of them?
Yeah.
And I remember when
But they're more, yeah, go on, go on.
there,
I was gonna say the field skills in Xenoblade 2 are attached to like your what are those your what are the persona things? Your
oh, the
blades.
blades.
Yeah,
Oh,
they're attached to your blades. So
oh,
so yeah, so it gets like a little crazy, you know.
okay, that
Whereas
sounds
for
contentious.
Xenoblade, yeah, whereas for Xenoblade 3 they kind of streamlined it to where
Yes,
like you don't have to like collect blades and stuff
no,
like that to use field skills. So it's like I think in Xenoblade 3 you get field skills just like naturally as you're
brilliant.
going.
Yes,
At certain points they'll just give you, yeah.
yeah.
So
They and
mhm,
so you don't realize how much you are assuming is totally blocked off from you until you realize you have these field skills and they start sending you back to previous
yes.
locations. And then you start realizing, oh no, all the design that I've always appreciated about Xenoblade, where they'll throw 40 level characters ahead of you, and you're like, I just ignored, I've been trained to ignore them or avoid them because of how Xenoblade interacts in the world. It's like the minute you see anything that's so over leveled, you're like, all right, how do I skirt around the sides? How do I skirt around? It creates a beautiful tension of like movement.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so
Yeah. Yeah.
it made me realize for all of my first blush of like, this is more of a straightforward experience. I'm like, no, these are labyrinthian. There's all the verticality I've wanted, all these. And I was like, this is I love the open. Like I've always loved the openness of the Xenoblade series, but I was like, there's an impression I got from folks where they're like, "Oh, it's not as open." I was like, "There's no way you could." I don't think there's a way that we could say it's not as open and not as enriching to continue to unpack more and more pieces. But how did you feel about the world design or the world building here?
In Xenoblade 3, I feel like they did a good job of even more than Xenoblade 1. I'd say probably more than any of the Xenoblades. They did a good job of making everywhere feel connected.
Yes,
So, one thing I like to talk about with Xenoblade 3 is how let's say you start a side quest in one colony and um the side quest relates to someone who lives in another colony. If you just happen to be like passing by that colony, one of your party members might say like, "Hey, didn't Kevin need that thing from like the bakery? Like, shouldn't I don't know if you want to get started on that, but or so stuff like that will be like, oh, like this is a real world. Like they
yes,
are acknowledging that, like, hey, you're on this side quest and this person lives here. I don't know if you were cool with that. Like it's just very interesting how they make everything connect with
yes,
this game. It's very cool. And the again, blanking on names, but the area where you eventually get the boat, right?
yes,
And you can just like drive around at see it felt like a disc 2 basically. I'm
yes,
like, oh, okay, this play the I'm the world feels like it's growing, it's like we can get more into that, but and the city, everything is just felt like okay, there's things going on here. There are things going on here that might not even directly have to do with what I got going on right now. The world exists outside of me.
I
It's just cool. It's
I
just
want to
cool.
I want to build on that because I'm thinking about how half, not half, but a lot of the side quests are just built on, hey, if you just went to this place in the world, this person was going to be doing this thing. And you're just kind of like, huh, okay, I'll get sucked. Like, and you just get sucked into that like small vignette in that world. And they do it both for like the quote unquote important side quests, right? The ones that give you classes,
Yes, yep.
and then you get it for the non quote unquote less important side quests. And I think that
Yes,
that
yeah.
gives a richness. Like I didn't appreciate how I did it earlier. So earlier in the game, I was really like trying to find all the. I was like, I hate not having access to all the classes and making sure I'm able to get everything. So I'm hunting for side quests online of like, where do I need to find this? And I was like, no, I need to trust the map location more. And when I got to chapter 5 and started to pay attention to where you are with the boat, where you are, and like being able to bump into naturally occurring. There's a moment where you're traveling in the boat and you just kind of see the large piranhas walking, and it just a naturally occurring. You're like, wait, hold on. You're gonna find it just out here roaming, and that changes your entire like desire. It builds. I guess I don't know how else to say, but it's like the side quests are so connected to location in a way that you will stumble upon them in what feels just like authentic ways.
There you go. There's one side quest to that point of like stumbling upon things in a natural way. Do you remember, again, I know we're gonna
Yeah.
blank on names here,
Yes.
but Colony Tau is the colony that's kind of like in these ruins. It's a very green area.
Oh, it's like
And
that's where you get what's her name? The one with the bow and arrow, right?
yes,
Yeah.
yes. And and this colony is being abandoned, I think. Like
Yeah.
nobody cares about this colony.
Yeah.
So there's one area around this colony, right? Where if you go underneath, there's an elevator that you can just stumble across.
Oh,
I went underneath and stumbled across this elevator, right? And then I just pushed the button and activated it. And I went back up to the colony where the colony is. It's a very small colony. And talked to somebody. I saw like an icon over
right.
them. I talked to somebody and they were like, "Oh, I didn't think anybody that elevator got activated down there. I didn't think anybody was going to use that." And I was like, "Oh, like
That's
so, so so it's just one of those things where it's like the world is like react is really like living and breathing. Like it's a
yes.
Xenoblade, I think, continues to like get better at this. Xenoblade X did this too in a lot of different ways, but it's not a Xenoblade X episode. But Xenoblade X did this. Xenoblade 1 did it. Xenoblade 2, it probably did, but so much of Xenoblade about what stands out for Xenoblade 2 for me has to do with like characters and main
Mhm.
story that a lot of the like physical world building uh escapes me.
Right.
But the series is really good at this in terms of like making you feel like you're existing in a world,
Yeah.
you know.
I even think about how like, when you travel to the colonies, there are like specific conversations you can eavesdrop on, and it's not just you eavesdrop, you get the conversation. It's like if you eavesdrop here, you get a selective of information, but it's not necessarily always the complete information to
Yes.
figure out the next task. It's like through moving through different parts of the city, you're like, you said something here, and then when you go and sit down at the campsite, you're able to start bringing pieces together and have conversation.
Yeah.
And it's like it doesn't make these tasks feel arbitrary. It feels like, oh, folks are having actual conversations that are relevant to your sometimes actually major plot points,
Yep.
or even things that your characters randomly say of like, I wonder how they're gonna figure this out. And you hear
Yeah.
people around town trying to actually answer that question, and you kind of like respond and like synthesize that as a and I'm like, I don't always like the mechanic of like slowing down in that way, but there's something about how that works that leads
Yes.
to this living vibe of that world.
Yeah. 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 It's very cool, man. It's very cool. like how the game does that. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And there are a lot of places we can go. So I'm just gonna start here. What is your thought on the combat system? I the very I don't know if there's a short version to say short and Xenoblade combat system don't ever really go together, but I'll start us off with this. I fundamentally think the way that the chain attack system works here is excellent, and I what I like most about it is that there is a little RNG built in for all
Yeah.
the for I like that you never know which three characters are going to show up first. Who
Yeah.
shows up first and how that affects the choices that you make or what options are available to you at the end of a chain attack are different. The fact that each hero has a particular strategy and change of how you do those things. So even if you quote unquote have your default strategy of I'm going to try to do this in the chain attack, you'll never be able to get it the same way if you're rotating in and out of heroes because you're always rotating in and out heroes to make sure more folks have different job classes. Like just even the
Hmm.
basics of that. I I like for me the idea of for what is a predominantly real-time game, what is a predominantly it takes so much to soak in everything happening on screen. It is nice to have a moment to be able to pause and be like, okay, not only am I trying to do this full chain attack for my own value, but it allows me to kind of reset all that's kind of taken place. That allows me to kind of take stock of like, okay, this person was in this direction. Like it allows me to breathe
Oh
in a
yeah, yeah,
way
yeah, yeah,
that
yeah.
I'm able to catch my breath of like, okay, now when I'm done, I can kind of take it in the particular direction I want to. And I realized that kind of hybrid of real time with a pause that allows me to take stock, at least for me, both maybe for reaction time purposes, but I do genuine things like Xenoblade gives you so much information, but it's nice to have a place where you can like soak in the moment you are in. So I'll start with there is like, how did you feel about the chain attack system? And I guess we'll evolve the full combat from there.
The chain attack system was great. The only thing was like, oh, I wish they would just like not change the music
Fair.
every time. You know, that was the only. But the chain attack system itself, very satisfying. Uh, and I love the animations, like the attack animations were very cool for the chain attacks. And like you said, I didn't even think about that. They do kind of give you a chance to breathe a little bit and kind of like recalibrate. The positioning in Xenoblade 3, like this position system, I feel like they expanded on it more than they have for every any. I like how they just keep expanding on the positioning system in Xenoblade
Yes.
3, period. Like um and how they kind of like are specific in those little prompts where you see your attacks. They're specific in saying like, hey, this will do this if you're behind them, like
Yes.
this will do this if you're in front of them.
Yeah.
um which makes you really like, again, like you said, the information aspect of Xenoblade's combat is a little controversial. I know a lot of people say like it feels like too much is on the screen to the point where it can be a little busy and like congested. Um, but what I like to say is that Xenoblade 3's combat is a UI bullet hell. Like that's what I
Ooh,
like to call it. It's like UI bullet hell where that's a part of the fun. Is
yes.
like parsing through all of that information and being like, okay, can't how much information can I keep track of at the same time? Like,
Right.
am I able to be aware of my positioning when this character's attack is about to
Yes.
cooldown is about to be finished? Like, am I able to like listen to those audio cues and be like, oh, okay, like I'm ready to do this attack now. Like,
Yes.
am I able to even when the chain attack is about to start? I have a little game I play where like I want to press that button the exact time that the chain attack bar is ready to be like,
Yes.
oh, got it. Like there's like a rhythm element to Xenoblade Three's combat. Xenoblade combat in general, there's
Yes.
like a rhythm element to it. But I think the information overload that Xenoblade 3 kind of gives you,
Yeah.
because of, I guess, of just them expanding on the combat system and having more characters than
Right.
any game in the
Right.
series, the information just gets crazy.
It,
So it's just kind of like that's a part of the fun for me of like
yeah. That
that, because sometimes I can't keep track and I'm like,
same. I,
and
let
that's exciting to me. That makes it like
ooh.
tense. I'm like,
Oh,
man, like,
that's a good word. Let me ask you this, because I do. How often did you change characters mid-fight? Was that a consistent thing you did? I do. I guess
I did.
you
I
did,
changed characters a good bit. Yeah, that
because
was like yeah, that was a regular thing for me.
that's right. So I noticed for me, whenever I got a class that I really wanted, like, well, I like playing as this specific class, I'd
Mm-hmm.
end up just meaning that class for most
Oh, okay,
fights.
yeah,
It wasn't until certain boss battles that basically tell you you can't get too comfortable. You have to rotate. You have to even yeah. I
yeah.
just want to talk about that boss battle because that's what I think the fullness of all what was laid in front of me came together. The M fight
I
where
see. That's another
okay.
one. Them letters, man. I don't remember.
So MV and I guess spoilers for Xenoblade 3, I guess if you're listening here, you're probably invested in some way. Uh
Yeah.
the alternate Mio.
Oh, yeah, 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 dude.
That
That fight,
that's when the
that
whole
fight was
system.
crazy. Oh
Yes,
man, hold on.
yes, yes, yes.
While we're on that note, which fight was it where you no, it wasn't. No. Never mind. We can talk. We can. Okay. Here's what I know. I know how to express this point without spoiling anything.
Yes.
So another thing I like about the combat, to your point about getting to that console M part and being like, oh, okay, I gotta make sure I'm doing this. Xenoblade 3 is a pretty long game.
Yeah.
Um, so and I'm a short game guy. But one thing I appreciate about Xenoblade 3 is that, again, it feels like discs. Like when RPGs used to have discs, you can pinpoint certain parts of the story for Xenoblade 3 where you're like, oh, this is, if this was a PS1 game, this is where you would change discs. You know what I'm saying? Like this is where they would because at the beginning of the game, right? Um the combat system uses the flame clock. You
Yes.
remember that?
Oh,
Like,
wow. I forgot. You're right.
yeah. At the beginning, you have to pay attention to the flame clock. And
Right.
then after a few hours, they just throw that away. They're just like, oh, all right, that was just for that time. Now that no spoilers, now that certain things have happened in the
Right.
story, you don't have to think about the flame clock anymore.
Yes.
But that was a part of the combat system at the very beginning. So one thing I like about Xenoblade in general, this is definitely a general Xenoblade thing,
Yeah.
is that the combat system isn't just you get a new move.
Yes.
The combat system is like through until the very end of the game. Well, not very end, but
Yeah.
until like the end part of the game, it's not just new moves. You're getting new systems throughout the game. That I don't know if I'm being careful here,
Okay. Okay.
but
So
there's one part. There's one system that comes at towards the end. No
yes.
pun intended. But like, there's one system that pops up that like also changes like how you engage with the combat with Noah. You know what I'm
Yes.
saying?
It,
So
and it changes how you start building them out different. Yeah.
yeah, that is one thing I really appreciate about Xenoblade Three's combat is that like for a game this long, I actually would prefer you to do things that drastic to be like, okay, we're just going to throw away the flame clock, and now you have to think about the battle system differently. Like the battle system is like some totally different thing now. Not totally different, but
Yeah.
it's like this is just this is a totally different way you got to think about combat now versus it just
Yes.
being new move, new party member. It's more than that, you know.
There's so many places I want to respond. I'm going to start here because you used the disc thing.
Yeah,
If this were a PlayStation 1 game, how many discs is this? This feels like a three disc game. That's my, and
this will be 3 discs.
I'm gonna tell you the three places where this breaks, or the two places where this
Yeah.
breaks. It ends when you the I guess what the Ethel fight.
Yes.
That's the first disc.
Yes, for sure, for sure, for sure. I know where you're talking about. Yeah.
Console M.
Yes.
Those are the two places where this breaks into three discs. I
Yeah.
are is there another place where you might break it at?
Um, because when you say the console M, I was gonna say, and I don't know if I'm misremembering that, but after the part where you get the boat.
I think that's before because you take the boat because console M is at the end of the prison break.
Yes,
So you're right. You could argue that the boat is where the next disc should happen.
that is
Yeah,
debatable, but I
yeah,
get
yeah.
what you're saying because you have to end on like
Yeah.
a big thing
Right,
or
but
whatever. Also, I forget how many hours this is into it. When do you get to the city?
beginning, ooh, beginning of
Yeah,
chapter 5, right?
yeah. So would
Ooh,
that be after Ethel? Is that after?
that's before console M. That's before you get the boat because you get the boat.
Oh, so it might be that. I might say the city.
Yeah, you're right. That's right. That makes a lot of sense.
I
City,
might say the city.
yes, right. Because
Yeah, yeah,
city
yeah, yeah,
to the
yeah.
boat. Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's the right to do it.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Because that city part, again, when we're talking about like the world constantly expanding, that part is like, oh,
Yes.
there's a whole nother. I didn't even do everything you can do in the city.
Oh, I did not, and it
Yeah,
feels. I mean, so I haven't played. What is it? Future Redeemed is the joint, right? That's the
yeah,
DLC. So I don't have full answers, but I'm like, even the light ways in which they refer to is it the six folks who have all statues. Um,
yes.
I'm assuming that gets covered in Future Redeemed in some way or form.
Um, somewhat.
So,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, yeah, it does.
okay, okay.
It
I was
does.
because I
There's
mean,
still some questions that need
mm,
to be answered, but for the most part, they talk about those people. The I know who you're talking about though.
yeah.
The descendants.
Yes, that is it. And so I say that to say, like, even thinking about the level of world building that they threw in at you, and as a person who didn't come into this game with the expectation for it to square both Xenoblade 1 and 2, I think that's kind of a lot of people's expectation going into this game. Where I
Yeah.
think for me, I took Takahashi at his word, where he's like, you could play this on its own without having to engage with that thought fully.
I
But
think so too.
I, to me, I'm like, the game stands on its own. Like, if I never even played Xenoblade 1, I think this game stands on its own. Like,
Yeah.
I,
Mm-hmm. I
I
agree.
okay,
I agree. As someone who played like Future Redeemed, I think does kind of like start trying to
yeah,
tie things together and stuff. But for the most part, like um Xenoblade 3 stands on its own for the most part, in my opinion.
yeah,
And just knowing those references kind of makes you be like, oh, okay, that's where that comes from. But I mean, and I may do a video on this myself, but I think people kind of generally overstate for most games like how important it is to like go
yes,
in the correct order. I mean, most in real life, most of the times you can just connect the dots through context clues or common
yes,
sense, or if it really is that serious, you can go back
right.
and be like, oh, okay.
I
It's not gonna be like, you know what I'm saying. So I don't know. I don't want to get too deep. That's a
we
tangent, but
we'll book it for it. I want us to eventually have a
yeah,
conversation about the overvalue of lore a little bit
yeah,
in our community.
yeah,
But we'll
yeah.
put that aside because that's a whole. Let's get
That's a
back
whole
to.
nother conversation. Yeah.
We've been going unpacking the combat system. I guess I'll go in this direction. Like, what was your favorite class to play as, and what do you when you think about how the class system worked? How did you enjoy it? Did you find it meaningfully impacting how you built? And I, yeah, I'll start with those things. I think we can like go further on top of.
Let me remember the names.
Oh man, I'm glad I'm not
So
alone on that. This.
yeah, my favorite class. I'm trying to remember who was the guy who had he kind of looked like Cloud Strife, and he had
Oh,
kind of like a scarf
oh, the
around
Full
him.
Metal Jaguar.
Yes, Gray,
Yes, 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 yes,
Gray. Yeah. That class was cool.
yes, yes.
Yeah, I just wanted to fly. I just wanted to do the style. I just wanted to do the stylish stuff.
It,
So,
I'm glad I'm
and I
not.
found Gray by accident too. I wasn't like
That's the
class
one.
hunting.
That's what got
Yeah.
me. Where it's like, how else would I have bumped into this person?
Yes. Yeah. 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 A lot of stuff like that just happens like uh randomly. And it was a quest where I think you had to like follow somebody or and like to chase them down. It was like you were following them and then you would have to follow their footsteps
Yes, that's
or
that
something
that is
like that.
great.
Yeah.
That is great,
Um,
and also, oh man, the Soul Hacker class, the
with a
guy
soul hacker.
who's basically like a blue mage, but in Xenoblade terms, the guy who can like who learns all his stuff from like the unique monsters.
Oh, I didn't get that one.
Oh snap! That's the one that's like has stood out to me the most of like, oh, now Xenoblade's just styling on people with how they played around with their blue mage class.
That's how big this game is. I don't think I ran into that one. The
You,
soul hacker class. What's the person's name?
I don't remember. He's a Mobius though, which is what makes that so interesting too.
Oh, Triton.
Yes.
Man, I need to go revisit this game one of these days. That's what Xenoblade is one of those games, man. It's so vast. There's so much. It's so like I'm not a quantity person,
Right.
but man, Xenoblade, like when they put stuff in the amount of content they put in these games, I won't say I never feel like this, but a lot of the times I'm like, man, all of this is cool, or all of this. And
Yes.
if it's not cool, they're not gonna like throw it in your face. You know what I'm
Yes.
saying? Like they're not gonna like beat you over the head with it. Like, oh, you got. I feel like they kind of do. It's kind of like a buffet of like, yeah. I mean, we know some of y'all like chicken. We know some of y'all like shrimp. We know some of y'all like salmon. We're just gonna put it all here. It's not. We're not saying you gotta eat all of it,
Right.
but we know. And it's sometimes like too with some of the content, like some of the systems in this game, like with the are they They're not gems. Are they
Yeah, they're
gems?
gems. Oh, God,
Okay,
we have even talked about yes.
yeah. I barely engaged with that.
Let's. Oh man, this is
I
great.
barely did anything with that, you but it's one of those things, and this is kind of circling back to the combat system. The combat system kind of gives you a bunch of tools. I want to say it's almost similar to like something like Pokemon or
Mm,
even Shin Megami Tensei, where it's like you don't have to catch every Pokemon to like get through the battle system, but they're giving you all these things to be like, hey, if you want to do it this way, if your brain
right.
works like this,
Yes.
then we're giving you the option to do this. We're giving you the option to use these gems to like maybe raise your attack a
Uh,
little
yes.
for this boss. Like some boss battles, when I was having a hard time, even though I didn't engage with the gem system generally, I'll be like, you know what? Let me raise my defense
Yes.
a little bit. You know,
Yes.
let me raise my defense a little bit. But it's not something where they're gonna be like, oh, if you don't use the gems, you're freaking screwed. You know, it's not. So that's what I appreciate about Xenoblade's battle system is that it's very customizable to
Yes.
where like you can really approach it in a lot of different ways and get things done.
All right. I've said Xenoblade 3 feels like a game of inches. Like it is the small margins of change that you often make that feel
Yes.
like make when I lose a battle, I'm like, okay, if I make just this small change or give myself the ability to have this, or even if I quit, I'm like, okay, that actually feels like the small difference between getting through and not getting through. Because I feel
Yes.
these, I will say this, I understand anybody, and they're not wrong. These are long battles, especially when you get to like
Oh
the
yeah,
big
that's one of the
monsters,
issues. Yeah.
and so it could feel very frustrating where you're like you've pulled in 20 minutes, and you're like, all right, I'm about to wrap this up, and then you're just not prepared for what comes next, and it's disheartening. And so I know that level of folks who are like, man, I want the changes to feel so drastic. But I like that small things add up in the larger and larger. Like I had to be more, even going back to the positional, I had to be more disciplined about how I moved my character on the space because I'm like, I was trying to be with my attacker so out there trying to get all the attacks from behind to get certain things. But I would die if the enemy I'm facing is going to target me out because of my aggro. Like even
Yeah,
thinking
yeah, yeah.
about like I love the incursor class. That was my favorite class. That's the one that I think Tyon gets. It has like high critical damage. And I noticed that if like I got played a little bit reckless with that class, I'm like, you're gonna get punished if you're being away from your group. You're gonna be punished. Yeah, it gives you that extra like attack point. It gives it, and so there are times where you have to be more disciplined about like I can't for all the conversation about Xenoblade being kind of a spammy game. I'm like, this game doesn't always allow you to get away with that. It really go for it.
No, one thing I was gonna say on that point, and I think a lot of people don't notice this about Xenoblade. I guess because maybe it can depend on how you play. I don't know,
Right.
but I do there. The long battles are somewhat of an issue, but unlike a lot of RPGs, um, specifically like from Japan, uh, but even RPGs in general, like in Xenoblade, once you do an encounter, the way EXP works and the way even the customizability of the battle system works, you generally don't have to do it again. You get what I'm saying? Like,
Yep.
so I think they try to do a good job of giving you so many different ways to grind that you don't have to all if you don't want to, you don't have to repeat encounters.
Yeah.
You don't like you get experience for just arriving to a new area.
Yes.
You sometimes get experience for just obviously you get experience for side quests, you know, and there's side quests everywhere. The gym system allows you to be modular about your stats. So if you want to go that route, you can kind of, you know, increase your level that way, right? Um, and yeah, there's the collectopedia,
Yes.
all these different things like allow you to grind in ways that just have to do with you engaging with the game in your own way, as opposed to just like, let me beat this horde of penguins
Right.
5 times. Like, if you don't want to, you don't have to do that.
Right.
So sometimes when I'm in those long battles, I can kind of forgive it because I'm like, I don't if I want to avoid this, I probably
Right.
if I want to finish this battle and never do it again, I can play the game that way if I want to.
Mm, okay. That
Yeah.
that's fair. I will. There's one place where I feel there's only one place where I feel like that's not true, but everywhere else you're right. Like everything else, and even
That's what I was gonna say. I
yeah,
think it might be I'm being careful here because
yeah,
I
yeah.
think it really might have to do with how you play the game. Because
I think
like
you're right.
I'm somebody who like for Xenoblade specifically, I'm always like just going off the beaten path.
Mm,
So by the time I get to a battle,
right. You've already
sometimes, yeah, like I'm already like it
yeah.
doesn't feel like I'm grinding, you
No.
know. Oh, and of course, boss battles are
Yeah.
always going to be, um. Oh, I'm sorry, that's not what we're talking about. Of course, there's sometimes where you get through battles by the skin of your teeth, right?
Yes.
So it could be that like you got lucky,
Yeah.
and you're not the right level. Yeah, and you're not the right level. What are those things that those little mini places that you can find that like um you know what I'm talking about? Like they're kind of like bases.
The camp,
Um
not the camps.
not the camps. Um
Trying to think what you're saying.
what are those things called? I would go around like looking for those things because they're like these bases where like you would have to like maybe beat some enemies around it to take over the base. It's not called a base, it's
Oh,
called something.
I'm trying to think. It's funny because you even get into other things. They have special encounters for you to even get like the no pawn coins to like cut through certain things. The
Yes. Yeah.
you even got me thinking about like they really give you a lot of ways to like cut through different aspects if you really needed
If
to.
you really want to, if you want to, that's what I'm saying. Like it's really just Xenoblade 3 is a very customizable
Yes.
experience in terms of like how the I like I know people talk about the story of Xenoblade a lot, but I really feel like the main draw of Xenoblade is the world.
Yes.
So I feel like the game really incentivizes you to explore and engage with like as many aspects of the world as you can, and it rewards you for doing
Yes.
that. So
Yeah.
yeah,
And so,
go on what you
no,
were gonna
I'm
say.
just gonna say as a response to that, that's why I love the Soul Hacker class because it gets you to incentivize. So I don't always do all the unique enemies. I notice that when I normally play a JRPG, I don't really care about this is the special one. This is the one that has these like I'm playing Tales of Berseria now, and every time I see one of those, I'm like, I do not care. The fact that
Yeah,
that's the only way that you can build this class, you do not get arts in any other way. You literally get arts from these unique enemies, and this class can change its type. It can be a healer, it can be a defender, it can be an attacker. And that's all based on the unique enemies you fought at different moments. Like, and I'm like, I would have never really overly engaged with the unique monsters of Xenoblade 3 in terms of that mechanic. But tying that to a class and tying that to a whole different building approach, it's another example where I'm like, man, they just they're like, you sure you don't want to play around this idea? It might be fun. It might still be of interest to you. Maybe we can frame it in a different way for you to engage.
yeah, yeah. I really wish I could find like what the name of that thing is. Piranha's Hulks. Piranha's Hulks. So
Okay.
they're the parts where like um if you come across the Piranha's Hulks, you have to reboot them.
Oh.
Um and then you a quest will activate, and the quest involves defeating enemies around the Hulk. And then after you beat them, um the party you got to use a certain amount of ether cylinders to like reboot the Hulk, and then you can get the fabricators and the containers and all that stuff, and then you can use those Piranha's Hulk bases to like as rest spots and to like
I have not
get
interacted with that system at all. Now I have to go.
that's what I'm saying. Like there's so much that's what I mean by like a lot of how what happens in Xenoblade 3 or how you engage with the game is going to be specific to how each person's brain works.
Yes.
Because the Piranhas Hulks, every time I ran across one, I was like, "Ooh, I gotta take it over. Like I gotta take it over." So this even goes all the way back to Xenoblade One with like Colony.
Yes.
I think
Colony
it's
six.
11, not
Well,
Colony 9. No,
it's
Colony.
six.
What was it?
Colony
Huh?
six.
Colony
The
6.
rebuild project, right?
Yes. So like, I didn't do that at all.
I'm with you.
You
I
know what I'm
barely
saying? I barely touched it. But there's so many things like that in this game where like if you want to, that can be a way that you grind,
Yeah.
right? And then that will affect things you do later on. So
Yes.
yeah, I'm
Oh,
glad I found that.
I'm glad that man, this is such a dense game in like the best
Yes.
ways.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a lot going on.
It's a lot going on, and the only thing that I remember of like I wish this were different are how class caps work.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like one of the things I noticed in my playthrough, and this is, and I know this is partial for me because I love class systems. Whenever I feel like I maxed out a class and it was effective in battle in a way, I would have this tug of war of like, I love how it's effective in battle. I love this. I don't want to change because I'm like, this party composition is going to work for me. But I would feel like if I didn't consistently change the classes all the time, that would when it comes to boss fights or like certain moments, I would not have all the skills needed to be able to take advantage. And so it feels like I
Mm.
would be punished for not staying with for not consistently changing, which affected my thing of like, I love this class. Like this is my play style. And I might and always having to change makes me feel like, okay, I can't just stay in a rhythm of play that I like. I always have to change. And so on one hand, it's good because I don't get too complacent, right? Like you are not going to be rewarded for complacency for your builds. But I also think for one of the appeals of a class-based game for me is that if I love a specific class, I want to carry it all the way through. And I think the only way you do that is when you do the ascension quest. And so
Yeah.
if you don't do that, you're kind of like capped at 10. And so there are times where I'm like, what, we have like 20 classes in this game?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not doing 20 Ascension quests.
Yeah, 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 yeah,
I
yeah,
hate
yeah,
to
yeah,
say it.
yeah, yeah.
Like, it'd be nice, but I'm not doing 20.
But when we talk about
Yeah.
maining, right?
Yes, yeah.
There's different ways you can main in Xenoblade, right? Like
Yeah.
you can main a class, right?
Right.
You can also main a play style. So there are some
Mhm.
people who like they just focused on the ascension quests
Right. Yes. Yes.
and just a lot of this is about your bandwidth, right?
Yes.
Because some people, like we were talking about the Ferranis Hulks, some
Yeah.
people can focus on that.
Yeah.
You know, they're like, okay, that's the main, that's one of the main things I'm gonna
Mhm.
focus on. I'm gonna focus on getting the Ferranis Hulks and crafting these gems, getting these ether cylinders. And then there's some people who are like, oh, I'm gonna focus on these ascension quests, you
Yes.
know, and so I can build get these classes
Yes.
up, you know what I'm saying? And then there's some people who are like, oh, I'm gonna just push through the story,
Right.
you know, and then it's just or there's some people like I'm gonna build a collectopedia. It's just like all these different ways it can
Yes.
be like this is what I'm gonna focus on,
Yes.
so that there's even some people who like are like, oh yeah, I'm just going through these super bosses. Like
Yes.
they're just hunting down the super bosses. I didn't do that,
No.
but that's one way you can play the game, you
Yeah.
know.
Even
So
thinking
there,
about you filling out the relationship maps, like that could be
yes, yeah, yeah. I'm not sure. I'd be curious to know why they densely pack Xenoblade games in this kind of way,
Mhm.
because I struggle to believe that they're like, oh, we want y'all to do all of this.
Yes.
I think it's really just to be like give you choice,
Right.
you know, to give you the options to be like, okay, how do you want to play? I'm not sure if it's like I'm not sure if they're approaching it in a we are hoping y'all are completionists, type
Right,
thing. I'm not sure if that they're doing that. I really think it's like on some buffet type stuff.
right. And
Of like, okay, um, choose your adventure type thing.
and what helps is that the strength of different parts of the buffet, like it's not as if, oh man, if you touch that like those collard greens over there, you just go over there, you like no, it's like every part of the buffet you could argue is like, oh, that might be the strength of this game. Oh, that might be the
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
it
Yep.
is fascinating. The,
Mm-hmm.
the I guess we can start getting into story conversations, I guess. Oh,
Yeah.
there's one thing I do want to highlight about class system that I liked because I didn't notice it until towards the end of the game, and I'm like, oh, why didn't I catch it? I didn't really pay attention that for a lot of the class inheritors, obviously it's their mini vignette, but it's also them meeting people for them to learn about life in different ways as it relates to the world. And I don't think that really settled with me until the Ashera quest. Ashera is one of the defenders. She's the one who her entire colony is just natural fighters. So you meet her and her colony is trying to fight her because the consul got her to do essentially it was like labeled her as a traitor.
Oh.
And at the end of that whole thing, you end up engaging with the folks in town and they're not like they don't really dislike her. That's not even that. It's like the art of fighting is important to us. Fighting gives us a way to be, which is so fascinating because I'm like, compared to other colonies' stories about the way they feel about fighting, I'm like, oh, you're getting that world building built in where Colony Tau feels very differently about the nature of fighting than this colony. But it was very nice that Uni is kind of learning about like what is why like I mean I know it's a classic JRPG. What am I fighting for? But like also finding the value in fighting, the finding that to be important,
Yeah.
and Uni needing to learn and process that. It's nice a subtle story element on top of building the class inheritors where I'm like, oh, obviously you'll lead with this character to get this class and you use it to get everybody else to use it. Like even just something like that is a really cool way to approach classes. But I thought it was so thoughtful that they kept on finding story beats to teach the characters like elements of life or like really reflect upon who they are. So it wasn't just giving them the mechanic. It was like just really thoughtful vignettes. Like I'm thinking about Lands and the signifier. If you remember, she's the one who does the whole parade thing with
Hold on.
yes,
Signifier.
yeah, by Fiona, I think is her name.
Oh, yeah, 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 yeah. I remember. Go on, go on.
And so I'm thinking about Lance. You have two things going on. Lance has kind of tried to be the encouragement for everybody in the group in a way. Like he's quote unquote the dumb oaf, but he's also trying to be like the strong rock for everyone, which
Yeah.
now makes it like, oh, of course he's gonna need a support party at some point in time to kind of literally encourage everybody, but also see he's now learning at that moment in time because Fiona builds a relationship with one of the consoles. She doesn't hate the consoles, even though the console did a whole software, a whole. I forgot. I don't even know how you describe what the hell that console did, but essentially, it kind of sits in Land's face of like you have to find empathy for people, for the folks that you're fighting across the lines with, or there's potential ways to engage, which connects back to the story because I'm like, that's kind of the whole thing with Noah and Mio, right? Like they have to wrestle with other parts of them, and that changes the way that they engage with uh like empathy. And I was like, small details like that where certain characters are learning certain things on top of learning that class. I was like, man,
Yeah, 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 yeah.
that's
Yeah,
so thoughtful.
yeah. That signifier, that was an ascension quest, right?
I mean, there's
Not
an
an ascension.
the signifier is just a normal class quest that you can bump into.
Okay. Okay. So that whole thing,
Yeah.
I think was my favorite.
Yes.
I think because it was like a betrayal and
Yes.
a lot of stuff going on there where I was like, oh, you can't trust anybody.
Yes.
This
There's
is like, so you were lying the whole time. And then the whole town now is like turning against you because it's like, oh,
Yes.
the whole like it was masterful, masterful. But
I
you
mean, we
want to
can
talk
always,
about what else did you want
I
to talk about
mean,
the story?
I was about to say, it's like, it is hilarious that we're this long into the recording and we barely touched upon any of the story beats.
Yeah, yeah. I was like, yeah, we've been going for about an hour, almost an
Uh,
hour.
all right, I'm gonna try to keep these thoughts truncated since you have to eventually skedaddle.
Yeah,
I like this cast a lot.
yeah,
I like I think one of the things that's harder with this game is that it doesn't always have these big grand moments, which they are. Like there are we can talk about those moments soon, I guess. Spoiler warning for those who have gotten to this point. We're about to probably
yeah.
unpack those. But I'm very much feel like the way that they engage with their emotions and reflect upon these things, it happens so much more in the downtime experience. Like I'm the thing that stands out to me, Senna and Lance are talking outside during the prison break moment, and you can kind of see Senna wrestling with the fact of like her importance. Like, what does she really bring to this space? And
Oh
that's
yeah, yeah, yeah.
and you can
That was a character building moment for real.
it was, and it'd been building to this big point of like, hey, she's inspired by Mio. Mio, like that's almost how she finds her value in herself. And so she doesn't recognize her own strength. She doesn't do any of that. She's like, I'm doing this. And but that conversation of her and Land, just outside, separate from everybody else, as not this like grand, great story moment, but just like a small interaction. Because I would argue, even up until that point, they're probably the two characters who get the least amount of screen time or least amount of moments. And they're both kind of wrestling with that for themselves in that way. It's
Yeah,
those small moments or even the campfire moments when you see them bonding in different ways build the relationship along this cast where I'm like, it is not this overtly bombastic thing. It's those small reserved things that I think give them a I don't always like using this word. They do feel like humans. They feel like real people.
yeah, yeah. Like, um, even the way the game uses flashbacks, I usually don't like too many flashbacks with
Right.
RPG stories, but they did a good job of using those flashbacks to kind of give you, I guess, the reasons for why characters in your party may be the way they are, right? Like how
Right.
with Mio, um, how Mio had kind of like that survivor's guilt,
Yes.
but you know about the experiments they were
Yeah.
doing. For her colony was doing all those experiments, and her friend saved her and gave her the flute as a gift. So that kind of gives you context into like this guilt that Mio carries,
Literally.
uh, and this kind of like this weird kind of relationship she even has with her colony. Like,
Yes.
oh, y'all were doing experiments. Y'all are the reason my friend, you know. So I really like how they did a lot of these different techniques, like you said, the small conversations or even the flashbacks to kind of um give you an idea of like, okay, this is why this person is the way they are. It's not just like a self-flagellating
Right.
flashback thing of like, oh, you know, this is what happened, 10 years ago, and isn't it so mysterious? It's like they did some of that, but for the most part, a lot of the times it was like, okay, we're doing this to like give you a better understanding. Even the childhood flashbacks, right?
Yes.
About they did the flashbacks to when Noah would be training with the other kids and stuff.
Yes.
And then they tell it eventually gets to the point where what's the Nopon's name? What's
Oh,
the
is it Ricky? No, it's not.
no, it's not Ricky.
Because it's Manana and Riku.
Riku.
Yes.
And then no, well yeah, it was Riku that gave him the sword, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And then eventually they're like, oh, okay, this sword, I'm giving you this for XYZ reason.
Right.
So, and now you're looking at that sword, and there was a moment where he was talking to Mio, and then Mio was like, what is the name of that sword? And then he says it, but they don't let you hear
Yes.
what he said. So now you have a new, you're thinking about like when it was handed to him, and why
Yes.
didn't they let you hear the name, and like all these kinds of things. So and I hope I'm remembering that right. But if I'm not, somebody will correct me. But yeah, like I really appreciated how they used flashbacks in this game.
It didn't feel, as you said, they provided context. Like, because
Yeah.
I think so much about the character. I think his name is Chris, who starts showing up like the second half of the game in Noah's flashbacks as his equivalent to like Miyabi, where this is a person that he saw doing the off-seer job. This is a person who he admired how this person was doing the off-seer job and how that starts to affect the decisions that he wants to make. And I'm like, oh, you at some point in time, you don't really the only other people from his colony you've met was Urine, and you do the whole
Yeah.
stuff with Urine. But I'm like, why do you keep bringing up Chris? And it's like it really is just to like, yes, there's a whole boss battle with it, but it's like that stuff does it like it really is about like this is why Noah sees the world this way and not like
Yeah.
this is his origin story. But it's like no, like this is the thing that he's hold on to, and that's gonna play a role in the larger story.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Uh, I guess to continue to make quick use of time, what I guess let's just get to it. What did you think of that chapter three ending moment? Like, just talk to me about how just excellent.
You got to tell me. I don't remember
So
chapter
chapter three is
numbers.
the Ethel fight, and then you draw the lucky seven for the first time. You break the flame clock.
Oh man.
Talk
Look,
about that,
man.
please. Talk about that.
When let me just say, the way Monolith Soft does cutscenes, man, like, and this is when Ethel dies, right?
Yeah,
Okay. The way they do cutscenes, man, I still think they are number one. They are number one. From the choreography to the way the music just kind of like comes in and adds that emotional weight to what's going on.
yes,
You know, like that that is cinema, man. I'm one of those people where if a game doesn't, I'm a cutscene skipper.
yes.
I don't skip cutscenes in Monolith Soft games.
Not at all.
I'll be looking forward to it like I'm watching TV. Like I'm like, yo, when's the next one?
I
When's
think
the next one, man?
I think
I didn't expect her to like. By the way,
yeah,
like Ethel's disposition. I mean, I guess this is kind of tropey,
right.
but the hard exterior,
Yes,
strict kind of thing, and then all of a sudden, her kind of having a change of heart
art.
of being
Yes,
like, no, you know what? I'll die for you, like type of thing. Like that. It's tropey, but I don't know the way Monolith Soft just executed it in terms of like just
yes.
visually and presentation wise.
The-
I just felt chills, man. I was like, yo,
yeah.
this is I this reminds me of why I watched anime.
You could tell that whatever anime that they grew up with, like they the fight choreography is just a different level.
Yeah,
That's been kind of the thing that's like blowing my mind because I do think a lot of the cutscenes are like straightforward interact, but like when those
big ones
fights,
when the big ones happen. Yeah,
you're like this this is Sakuga. Like this is
yeah, yeah. This is yeah. That they're the only ones who I can't think of any other developer right now that does anime type cutscenes in that way of like, oh,
Yeah.
this is just cool. This is like there's no other word I could use except this is just cool, man. Like I miss. I'm not even saying I miss
Yeah.
because I don't even think it's not many developers that really like
Right.
channel that coolness
Yep.
of anime in terms of like
Right.
the way
Yes.
even the way they slash the flame clock. And there was one moment, I think this was towards the beginning, when Mio and Noah kind of like do kind of like a team up to slash the flame clock.
Yeah. That.
Just like those kind of moments that are just cool for no reason. It's just
Yes.
like, yeah, it's just cool to be cool. It's not, it's nothing deep about it. It's just cool. That's what I appreciate about all the cutscenes. But the Ethel cutscene kind of had like an emotional weight to it
Yeah.
that kind of took it up a notch for me. Of like,
Yes.
that's it.
I
That's it.
there's so many places I want to go, but I don't want to be recent of time. So I'm just gonna go to chapter 5. I want to know because I think I have my answer. The fact that I sat down there for about an hour, is it an hour of cutscenes, speaks to both a if you earn it through gameplay, I do not care. You earned it.
Yeah.
It is a proof of that to me, where it's like if you could earn it through gameplay, you could spaz on the story, you could or
Yeah.
that language,
Yeah.
like you
Yeah.
could.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I
Yeah. Yeah.
realize that's not the language you use, so forgive me for that, but like you can go all in on the story because you earned it. Like I Xenoblade always has those moments where I'm like, oh, this is a crazy boss battle. I'm ready to put down the controller and just enjoy and bask in
Yes.
what
Yes.
this
The
was.
cutscenes are a reward.
A true reward of like, and so how did you feel for chapter 5, just sitting down for that hour between end of 5, opening of 6, that jail scene where they're just like talking to each other across the jail?
Oh man, dude. Noah was down and out, bro.
Yes.
Like that was the moment where I was like, "Oh, dang, this dude is like he's he don't know. He's get I he was so sad, man.
They
He
use
I felt for I was like, man, he's this dude's giving up.
even mechanically how they convey that to you, where you're like, you have to move him each time to shake the thing, and you can sense the
Yeah.
frustration built, like even just a small gameplay to fuel in what that dread is.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. He was. And even they had there's even something they did like they kind of added like these bags in his eyes to
Yes.
kind of like really show you like, damn, this dude's stressed. This dude is stressed, you
Yeah.
know. Yeah, that was an emotional scene. I really appreciated that. Like, yeah, Noah, the dude was done. And also console N,
Yes.
the way he was even taunting them, the
Yes.
whole time of I was almost like, damn, where's this gonna go? Like, I wonder how they're gonna get out of this one,
I genuinely
It
didn't
felt hopeless.
that's probably the most hopeless I've been. I'm like, there's no real way to like navigate what this is.
Yeah, yeah.
Do I guess how did you feel about I guess the switch that
The
happened with
switch.
yeah, essentially you what is it? You find out after all of that, Mio and M switched cognition essentially.
Oh yeah, 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 yeah. That was one of the coolest twists. I remember writing that. Hold on, let me see
Yeah.
I'm gonna read what I wrote down.
Yes.
It
Dag, I
says,
can't see.
yeah, it's gonna, but I was pretty much, oh, it's there. I
Ah,
put it in all caps. The other Mio switched bodies with regular Noah's Mio.
yes.
She wanted the now with evil Noah.
Yes.
Like, um, that's something to think about. Would if with someone you love, like she switched bodies just to be with the evil Noah.
even it's not even, like she switched
I,
bodies to me to even though and it was also like he's gone so far, and I'm like, I have to let him go.
yeah,
And so, oh man,
yeah.
that
That is that's something to think about.
yeah. I will to be cognizant of time. I'll end with what I think is like what the game is getting at, which I think is a great way to talk about to be. Do you want to be with someone for the long term? But it's not just wanting to be with someone long term. It's like they made a very big emphasis at the end. It's like there's a little Mobius inside all of us where we kind of want to be in this like peak of life at any moment in time, right? Like once we get to a thing that we like, or when we hit any like tragedy or hit any of that, like we are like doing everything in our powers to like hold on to this moment.
Yeah, yeah.
And
At the
then,
cost of other people, because Noah had to kill
yes,
everybody
yes,
just to be with Mio.
yes. And
And just to have that, it's something to think about.
yes,
It's really something to think about. I don't, some of us do go that far, not literally
you're
killing
right.
everybody,
Yes.
but like some of us um do want to like kind of like preserve certain moments like forever at the cost of it can be anything. It can be at the cost of, you know, your
Yes.
family, the cost of your health, the cost of your community,
Yes.
uh it can be at the cost of your money.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? Like, um, yeah, having that kind of like obsessiveness, like it's a scary thought that like, oh, you don't know, like you can become that person.
Mhm.
And like you said, like there is a little Mobius in all of us, like so it's definitely something to think about. The game really did kind of make you think about obsession and love and like what it means to be selfish and
Yes.
how far would you go for the people you love,
And how far is too
it's
far?
yeah, yeah. So yeah, dude.
Yeah. So I'll end with two things and then I'll let you go. Is there any last things you want to mention about the story where you're like, I want to bring this moment up or a thing that stood out? And
Just overall,
yeah,
I know some people don't like the kind of philosophical approach to the story. How what's his name? Z.
Z.
Okay, they don't like how he was kind of like a representation of an idea type thing. Um, I just want to say for stories, I'm more of a journey, not the destination type person.
Mm,
I don't think the fact that Z was kind of like this kind of amalgamation of like people's desires or whatever. I don't think that took away from the story for me. Um, I think it kind of just made me think more about like, oh, okay, like it just made me like retroactively think about the story differently, but still appreciate because I still went through the journey with a certain mindset of like, oh, okay, like these things are happening, like people live every 10 years and then they die and like
yeah.
all those kind of things. I still felt that. And I think those characters in that world still feel that too.
Yes.
Um and yeah, that's all I gotta say. That's the main one of the main things I wanted to get out about the story.
Yeah.
Is that like I actually like the philosophical approach of the villain being a representation
Yes.
of you know, an idea.
Right. That is a good point. I do think a lot of folks are like the Mobius are quote unquote one note, and they're not wrong, but I think the way that they navigated it was effective. And I think especially looking at someone like Urine, like they found ways to make that representation or that idea get attached to people with weight. So like even if you didn't think Zed was perfect at this, like the fact that alternate versions of Mio and Noah were key central aspects like navigating this, I think they grounded it well. Like I don't think it was too heady or too one note. It's like they were able to at least attach this exploration to meaningful people whose stories that you're interested. Like even the side quest with the experiments of Miyabi, you get a rebooted Ethel and a rebooted Kamaravi, and that kind of
Yeah.
changes how you think of that as well.
Yep. Yep.
Uh, so I'm glad you brought that up, and I don't think it's a Xenoblade thing if we don't at least make a mention of music. And so I want to ask that as our like, what did you think of the soundtrack?
This was the best soundtrack in Xenoblade, in my opinion. This was the best.
Ooh,
Uh, hold on. I don't know if hope I'm not because I'm opening something right
all right.
now. Best soundtrack. I love the as much as it repeated all the time. I love the chain attack music. That music that comes when like everything is about to when a big moment is
Yes.
happening. I don't know the names of songs. I'm
Yeah.
not good at that. But like I love all the music that even the pause screen music, the start screen
Yes.
music. Why did they go so hard with that? Like, well, it's just the start screen, man. Like, you don't got to do all that. Like, like amazing soundtrack.
I I do remember playing it and not feeling the same level, and this is on me. Agnaratha from Xenoblade 1 and Satoru Marsha Night are like two of my most favorite video game music songs. I don't know if I have any songs from that, but I the flute motif throughout the game, whenever the flutes showed up, or even when they sent off characters, right? Like whenever they sit down and say, "Oh, you bumped into a person who passed away. Will you send them off?" And you just press A, but it's just like you play the flute, just like even small moments, you're like, this is still beautiful music. And I think that's the thing that I think is like, man, this is still a beautiful music game. I just don't know if it sits with me the same as other songs.
Yeah, 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 yeah. I loved it. I loved it personally. Um, but yeah, I know some people found some of the music just kind of like intrusive, but I was like, hey, I'm jamming right now. This is good.
Yeah,
So yeah, those are my thoughts.
no doubt, no doubt. Uh, so are there any last Xenoblade 3 thoughts you want to get off your chest? I mean, if we ever want to record like a full thing later, or you want to talk about other stuff later, we can always do that. I'm willing to do side quest episodes about this game because
Oh yeah, yeah, no, for sure. This is a big game, man. So there's a lot to
yes.
talk about.
Yeah.
But ranking Xenoblade X, Xenoblade 3, Xenoblade 2, Xenoblade 1. That's all I got.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
That's all I got.
Do you think I will like Xenoblade 2 based on the things I said I liked about 3? Because
Yeah,
I
you would like Xenoblade 2. Yeah, you
okay.
would.
Okay.
You would. The blades are pretty much classes, but more is the blades are kind of like Pokemon, pretty much, but
Okay.
they're like Pokemon where that let you change your class,
Okay.
I guess.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Yeah. It's hard for me to say it, but I do think 3 is better than 1. I have to.
I think so too. Xenoblade 1 isn't as dynamic as 3, in my opinion.
That's the thing where it's like I'm afraid to go back to Xenoblade 1 now. There's so much on the table here mechanically that I'm like, I could already feel that Xenoblade 1 mechanically will never feel this good. And
Yeah.
that's terrifying because Xenoblade 1 has been like my second favorite game of all time. And so I'm like, wow, have I actually played what might be in my new top five? And so,
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
uh, I hope X gets ported so I can actually finish the second half of that game and decide where that sits for me. The
Man, you it's a matter of time. Next year, man. Next year is the 10-year anniversary. So
X, yeah,
I'm thinking that that's when almost sure it's happening next year. I'm almost positive.
I think you're right. I think it's time. I think, like you said, I think folks are ready for it in a way that they weren't ready for it at the time of its release.
Mm-hmm.
I had a friend of mine when he and I discussed the game when it came out. He was like, I don't. He thinks it's dated. He thinks it's all these things. And I was just like, oh no, maybe I'm not playing enough games. And then the more and more I've played other games, I'm like, none of them feel like Xenoblade X. He messaged me about 2 years ago. And I was like, he finally replayed the game, and he's like, how did they do this? And I was like, I told you, they're up to something. They're up to something.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, but uh, I would just want to say thank you for making time today. I appreciate you. We went all the way in. This makes me quite.
Yeah, man. Yeah, this was like a good this was a good little this was a good discussion. I hope we can have it again. I know I'm kind of like, I don't know how long you intended on going, but uh yeah, I do want to talk about it more though.
Yes, I would love to talk more about it with you. If people want to find you, where can they find you?
YouTube.com/GK, Twitter.com/GK, that's JIIKAE, and GK.com.
Yes, and you should watch his recent video about Shin Megami Tensei 5 being technically bigger but technically small at the same time.
Yeah, 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 yeah. It's a cool video, kind of niche. I know Shin Megami Tensei hasn't blown up yet, but we getting there
In due time. In due
in
time.
due time. We'll get to Persona soon enough.
Yes. Yeah. We I mean, I don't know if anyone's getting into Persona. I want to believe in a world. Okay. For the next episode that we do this together, I'll actually visit. We can come back to this to a side quest episode later because we can't do it today.
Yeah, yeah.
What are the things that quote unquote Xenoblade can streamline? I'm using that very big air quotes to be received among people well. I've heard it enough where folks are intimidated by this game. Folks,
It's just production value. It just needs to get prettier. That's it.
okay, so that's okay. Because
I think it just needs to get more technically pretty and all that kind of stuff. I'm kind of like also
yeah,
my camera's kind of messing
yeah,
up now too, but
no problem.
yeah, I think that's it though.
Oh, oh, okay. That's much perfect. All right. Thank you. Thank you for everyone who's listened to Menu Combat this season. You can find me, The Wolves Den 25, on Twitter and Instagram and TikTok. You can find the podcast at Menu Combat on any of your favorite podcast catcher and Instagram and Twitter. So, and let me
Peace
stop.
out, y'all.